Yeah, I'm Michael Mathias, with CEO of Whereoware. Couple things about Whereoware as we get started. You see our title, first of all, More Data, More Problems. Actually, more data, more opportunities is what we're going to talk about. We already talked about we're a full-service digital agency. We do a bunch of stuff, lots of technology, UX, creative design. Not giving you a commercial, although I do want to share with you a little bit of what drives us as a company and something that's just driven me as an individual for some time, which I think is perfectly germane and relevant to today's conference. And it's these set of beliefs that I think are just so pertinent today as the market speeds up, as data and technology becomes even more fragmented, and tries to consolidate, and every time it tries to consolidate, it becomes more fragmented, and that cycle over and over and over. Like, what are the core beliefs that we have, and what are we really trying to accomplish? So I do want to spend just a minute or two on these. Every digital ecosystem has unrealized potential. This is so foundational to the way that we at Whereoware, and myself personally, approach every opportunity and every type of problem, data or otherwise. Does anyone know Scott Brinker? Does everyone read Scott Brinker's reports? Yeah, thank you. Scott Brinker had some staggering numbers a couple months ago around the number of applications and platforms inside companies. You might think, oh yeah, our companies, we've got a lot. We've got 10, 15, 20 platforms or something. He's talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications that are running all at the same time. And if you start, our little company, we started itemizing how many different applications we had and how many things were there. And I gave up after about 125. And it was just staggering. None of those are being used to their maximum potential. And I would argue that most of them are being used to a very, very, very narrow starting point. So foundationally, technology, data, there's tons of stuff you already have, which will be a theme of this presentation that you can use. Effective strategic thinking is not a commodity. Say it again, effective strategic thinking not a commodity. Everyone in this room, including me, said, I'm going to be replaced by AI. I am probably the easiest person to replace by AI. And maybe I should be replaced by AI. But strategic thinking will always trump, will always win. It's how you actually effectively use that. We're not going to spend a lot of time in this session around that AI, but I do certainly welcome some questions along the way if we want to sort of weave that in. There's no finish line. Improvement is always continuous, always, never stops. And what we see a lot with some of our clients and what we try to advise them to do is to don't think of this big launch and then let's see how it works. And then let's take some results. And then let's figure out how to maybe do something with another platform sometime later. What we say is, yeah, you probably have to do some remediation or some advancement or some innovation around your tech stack, your data strategy, your UX strategy. But how do you make that part of your everyday life? How do you take those standard deviations that are so large when you launch this big project and you've got so many things riding on it? And how do you minimize that? Make it constant, always learning. Bring data. Numbers don't have emotion. Numbers don't have emotion. And we'll talk more about this here in a second. And then, of course, because we're an agency, we have to put ourselves in our client's position and say, what are their goals? And this goes to one of my favorite maxims. Just because you can do something, and just because an agency has a great idea, and just because a new technology is super sexy, and just because you've read all about it, doesn't mean you should do it. Does it match these things? Does it actually help advance the cause? So because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And that, in my mind, is making sure that the client goals are always number one. So some of the company we keep, won't spend any time on this slide, but it just says we actually are a credible company. We actually have real clients. And now to the agenda. So if you came here hoping to hear something super innovative, brand new, and be blown away, sorry, not gonna happen. We're gonna spend a lot of time, not a lot of time, probably not enough time, talking about things that you may already know. And when I was thinking about this last night, you hear a lot of people say, I got to take better care of myself. I got to get in shape. I got to, be healthier, lose some weight. Now, what should I do? Well, you know what? Put down the fork, get off the couch. It's a little bit of the conversation we're going to have today. There's some very basic things that everyone says, yeah, I got that covered, or I'm not really sure I really want to do that. This is hard. And focusing in on those basics are the things that we're going to unleash all the potential that you already have. By the way, I've got a whole other diet book I want to release. It's 1 page, 2 sentences. Don't eat things that are brown. Don't eat things in a box. Think about it. So we're going to talk about the challenge with data, and then we're going to talk about 3 pillars of an actionable data strategy. So the challenges with data start with basics. Data versus information. What's the difference? Well, you may have seen this a million times, and there's probably a couple eye rolls here that say, yeah, I know what data is. I got it. What's changed is the fact that there's so much more data flowing so much faster. And everyone's scrambling and everyone's panicking to say, how do I make sense of this data? I go back to a conference I attended early in my career, and it was in Detroit. It was around the automotive space. And I remember very vividly the 2, at that point they didn't have chief data officers, but the head technology people at 2 of the 3 big car manufacturers on stage. And one guy was, well, our database has 250 million households and X number of terabytes for this many demographics and these kinds of things. And the next guy said, well, mine's got 275 households and it's got 99 extra demographic things and it's like 19, now they're yottabytes, but this giant data. Great. They're patting themselves on the back. It's awesome. One hand went up. The person said, what are you doing with that data? They looked at each other and went, I don't know. And that's the difference between turning data into information. And the difference between data and information is information offers context to the raw data. It's organized, it's purposeful, it leads to all the analytics. It leads to decision making. It leads to making your clients, your business, achieve their goals, whatever the goals may be. So what do they have in common? They have to be high quality and reliable to guide decisions. They have to be. Okay, this is the classic garbage in, garbage out. So no one is suggesting that data in its raw state is not important. And no one's suggesting information by itself is actually even possible. But how do you approach bringing those together, making sense of it? How do you not be misled by what the data is telling you because you didn't have the right context to collect it in? You didn't have the right mindset to think about, what do I do with this? So here's an example I've used before. Other people have used something similar. I love this example. It's close to my heart. Actually, a couple stats here first. Sorry. I got so excited about my example, I got ahead of myself. Only 53% of marketing decisions are influenced by marketing analytics, says Gartner. I think this is about 5 times too high. I do not believe this. Gartner is a very reputable, great company. I have many friends and colleagues there. I do not believe this. If this was the case, it'd be a whole different world out there. Worse, 33% of said decision makers cherry pick the data that they've already decided on the decision they want to find the data to support. This I actually think is low. I think we go into most every day thinking, I've got an idea, I'm going to go find up all the evidence I can to support it. And we don't let the data talk for itself. So guess who? Male, born 1948. Here's my example, by the way. Born in the UK, married twice, 2 children, royalty. Anyone like to have a guess? Sorry? Now, the King of England. Yeah, exactly, right? Pretty obvious. There's this other character, though, you may have heard of, that also has the same profile. I'm going to let you guess which one you think I may have more connection to. this side. But it's really interesting. So the raw data itself, without context, without understanding, without the correct assembly, can give you information that's wrong. So how do you get through that? How do you get past that? Some other common data challenges, which we're not really going to go into, but they're all very related to creating the proper foundation of a good data strategy. These things are probably all things that you've experienced in one way or another. Or if you haven't, you're gonna. Right? Siloed data and legacy systems. Yeah, who's got that? Probably every hand, yeah. Dirty, unreliable data. And what's worse around that, like really no methodology to figure out how do I fix it? Which is a very, very, very underrated and underrepresented part of all this conversation. How do I fix it? How do I decide? Lack of in-house skills or agency partners. Plenty of people say they're marketers, technologists, intersection of the two. But when it really gets down to it, it's really hard because there's still a lot of grind to get this work done. Lack of automation, inefficient process. Compliance and data privacy continues to keep ramping up, and being much, much more important about how you treat that. Of course, going to a cookieless world, all those types of things for sure. But depending on what industry you're in, all sorts of other regulations pressed in there. And then this is something that you'll see a couple slides we talk about, lack of C-suite report. C-suite report. Hello, C-suite support. And that goes into really what's the culture around actually relying on, investing in, and demanding a good data platform so you can enable your business. If you don't have the culture to support that, you're going to be pushing that rock up the hill for a very, very long time. So again, this is from our friends Accenture. They say only 32% of enterprises realize real benefits from their data. When you actually read this report and dig into it a little bit, really what this is saying is any benefit. So I like the optimism here, the exuberance. Still in our world and in conversations I get to have, I'm very lucky to have with some very senior people across some of our clients and prospects. So yeah, we're already doing that. We've got our data under control, we've got our analytics under control, we've got our reporting, we've got our measurement, we've got all those things. I say, that is awesome. You are on the 99th percentile. You are different than Accenture. You are different than Gardner was saying. You mind showing it to me? Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, okay, here's the report I get. Great, how's that informed? How's that? Well, yeah, I don't really know. Because there's really not that culture of that drive to understand, that drive to create the right foundation. So without it, these things are tough. Being proactive, having experimentation, doing attribution and modeling, which that is a gigantic subject by itself. The attribution, the art of being consistently wrong with consistently underlined. What choices are you going to make around that? Personalization, AI and CDP, and then compliance. These things, without that fundamental basis of what's data, what's the context for my data, how's the data become information, and what's my strategy to move forward, tough. So what are those actionable pillars of data strategy? Well, the preamble to that is, this summary. CRO is conversion rate optimization, experimentation, pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is personalization at scale. Pillar number 3 is a scalable data infrastructure. Okay. I'm going to talk about the preamble to this, but I want to make sure that I hit a very important point, that these are not necessarily exclusive to each other, nor are they parts that you have to do them in any type of sequence. So every company's got a different situation, a different set of challenges, a different set of opportunities, a different set of data, different set of managers, C-suite people, board of directors, constituents, on and on and on. So your ability to start on any of these things, that's the important thing. If you haven't started on them, just start. Don't be overwhelmed. The starting place here is these represent different data types. And within 5 minutes, we could probably add 50 more. We all said, let's put some more data types up here. We did an exercise. What do you got? It's like Phil Donahue over here running around. Yeah, okay, we got this. Phil Donahue is probably an arcane reference for some. But so you see, you've got CMS data, content data, customer data management, transactional commerce. You've got all these different data sources. What is the strategy to bring these things together? And should you? Going back to just because you can, should you? So what we like to advise and what I think is the best practice in all of this is coming up with a concept of a unified data layer. And please don't take this slide literally. This is not something that, oh, I need to go create a workflow and a content and data analytics and sales and marketing channel. The channels and how this data gets organized is unique to you. There are some consistencies, and there are some places that are easier to start than others. But the idea here is to say, what data can relate to another set of data? And then if I could do that and bring that together, what would that actually give me? So you start to create, some lines and some connections. And for ease of not making this look like a spaghetti chart, think of some ultimate utopian data layer where all data is connected to all data. Okay, now let's come back to the real world. It's not going to happen. Not anytime soon. But what might happen is, someone out here might be in charge of data analytics. Well, could I do a better job with personalization data if I actually connected my customer data management? Or maybe I've already got that. Maybe I've got a good CRM system that's a legacy system going back there. And is that data connected? Well, is it normalized? Is it rationalized? What's my process for doing that? And every time I add a new piece of data in, because now I'm looking and saying, gee, I'm getting a bunch of research from my insights team. I've got a new segmentation scheme. Well, what do I do with my old segmentation scheme, assuming I had one? How do I keep both those things? Do I need to keep both those things? What is the whole approach and the thought process? That's not technology. That's a strategy. Technology enables us to do things faster. It also enables us to do things poorly faster. So stepping back and saying, what is the right connection here? And what is the right prioritization? In my mind, that is the preamble to all of this data foundation work that we need to do to enable the things that we want, which ultimately result in some type of growth or deeper penetration, adoption, again, whatever your target is for your group. So the first pillar is experimentation. It's the foundation for everything. That creates a data set that is beyond reproach as far as yes or no. Did it work, did it not work? Did it work relative to other things I'm testing? How do I bring these things together? Okay, well, you're probably doing some experimentation you don't know you're doing. You probably also have experimentation at your fingertips that you don't know how to access. I would, going back to those hundreds of applications and hundreds of platforms that you've probably got running in your companies, I guarantee you, if you have not investigated, can they do basic experimentation, simple A/B testing, simple black or white, simple binary, non-binary, simple structured or unstructured? I bet they do. And if you're not taking advantage of them, you need to do that right away. You need to figure out what is that. And when you figure that out, then you have to go back to, now what do I do with that information? Going back to that data layer. How do I regress that back in? So here are some ideas here. Experiment on creative, cart and registration, channel mix, imagery, content. Again, like the other slide, we could probably spend 3 or 4 minutes and come up with 50 experiments. So we used to say some time ago, again, I've been around for a while, and it used to be like the idea that coming up with the experiments, coming up with the hypothesis, coming up with the questions we want answered has never been the problem. The problem has been, now how do I actually execute that? And the technology around that. What's interesting is that's starting to flip. The technology is being able to execute faster than we can understand how to interpret the data. So if you want to go experiment, you can go experiment much, much faster than you could 5 years, 10 years, certainly beyond that. But what's become more difficult is, how do I simulate that and what do I do with that now? Right? So this isn't the problem. The problem is the interpretation. Please start, though. Start. Okay? This goes to the cultural priority. This is one of my favorite stories, again, going back to a much older example. I spent some time in the early days of direct mail around financial services marketing. You know, who hasn't got any credit cards acquisition? There are probably 5 this week. Still works. That's why it's still happening. But one of my top brand bank clients they were just full rebrand. They were completely like, we want to modernize. We want to come down from this sort of behind the ivory tower. We want to be more of an everyman bank. And so you start to see imagery around the brands of banks changing 15 years ago, putting real people in there and people on bicycles and dogs and puppies and everyone's having fun versus we're the big bank. All that started to change. And they start doing solicitations. And when they start doing those solicitations with that type of imagery and brand, they bombed. And they were so attached to their new brand that they could not get their head around that a crappy little postcard that was a nasty color that said, sign up for a good rate on your new credit card, beat all the creative that cost 25 times more. They just could not accept that. So this is the category of, do you think or do you know? And we kept saying, we understand and we should experiment and we should test. But you can't go so far off the deep end that you lose your mind and say, these things that are working because you should keep working them. You should keep working them. So this is divorcing a little bit of your own emotion and your own bias to what you hope the data says versus what it actually says. And experimentation gives you that data to have that clarity around, what do I do now? How do I think about that? I hated the postcard too. It was nasty. It was just awful. And their new creative and the new brand in this particular case was wonderful. And eventually they found a way to beat that and they found a way around it. But for years, I'm not talking like a couple campaigns, years, they could not find something that beat the most rudimentary, awful thing that you would all look at and go, that's nasty. It worked. It worked. Second pillar is personalization at scale. So experimentation is great. Now what do you do with it? This is the applied part of marketing, the applied part of the data analytics. Do something with it. So experimentation, directly ladder to successful personalization programs and chasing that elusive one-to-one idea. I had the honor of knowing, if you know one-to-one marketing, that was a term that was coined by Peppers and Rogers back sometime in the 80s. I actually had the privilege of meeting them and knowing them and spending a little bit of time with them, and sort of when they were flying high. So let's say that was late 80s, early 90s, sometime in there. I will tell you that the idea of one-to-one marketing finally, just about now in 2023, might actually sort of be able to be done, maybe. And so the idea that the concept takes some time to catch up around technology, so we talk about technology is finally able to make good on the promise of some of these things around being more relevant in that one-to-one marketing. Here are a couple examples. Yamaha's been a great client for ours. We've got multiple divisions of theirs. These are all just random examples I threw up here. This is a personalized customer journey. This is something that, going in through a website, based upon the information that we have, first-party data, we're able to serve up things on both mobile and on the web. But these things are very, very relevant and focused on data that we have and have collected and are using, and then continue to experiment against each of the different images and different pieces along the way. Tim over here on our team was one of the head creatives on some of this stuff, so excellent work, continues to be the gift that keeps giving. Thank you. Another example, this is a customer journey. This is more of a expiration. This is married with more of an offer strategy and creating urgency. So that's working hand in hand with product and promotion and how you have the data inform these things. This certainly goes into, it's a nurture campaign, but it's also saying because of the products that you bought, these are the next things, and it's very important you do that. Again, in this case, primarily, this is actually almost exclusively informed by first-party and customer data. And then, the payoff numbers. I saw the Zillow lady, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. Her presentation was much fancier than this one on the keynote, if you saw that. With some videos, yeah, it was pretty sexy, wasn't it? It was nice. And she said, everyone wants to see some results. And so she put some results numbers. Just some basic personalization. Taking information that we already have that the customer willingly gave you, organizing it, and putting it into some type of content, some type of offer strategy. 92% increase in revenue. Revenue. We're talking about boats, motorcycles, big ticket items. Revenue, it's a lot. 116% increase in leads and 61% website visitor growth. This wasn't, we're going to rebrand. This wasn't, we're going to, do something crazy. This was using the data we had and saying, hold on, step back. How do we connect these dots better? And how do we make this message more relevant? You've heard this again and again, going back to the first thing. You're not going to learn anything new. You're not going to hear some new thing from me. What I'm going to say is, what's stopping you from doing it? Stopping you from doing it. The last pillar, which I will spend probably the least amount of time on, but we could spend a ton of time on, both because of the time in the session and it just becomes so many choices, is what is your data infrastructure? You got to have something, and you got to start somewhere. So going back to my original comment, doesn't mean that you have to have this gigantic system implementation project where you try to take all those data sources and rationalize them. It could be, I've got a bunch of legacy systems. Let's talk about pulling data out of 3 of them into a new place. Or one of the legacy systems it's okay. So let's use that as sort of the master place to put the data and start to do some rationalization. And if you're doing nothing, it's better than nothing. If you're doing something, how can you keep tweaking it? So, an obligatory tech stack or tech diagram here. We could spend hours on this, but look, the idea is to get data from all sources. The idea is to have it in a place to enable the AI, predictive modeling, segmentation, references, and then orchestrate across all these different things. Again, nothing new here. And I almost didn't put this slide in, but I wanted to put a commercial in for something that I already mentioned was very overlooked, which is this data integration layer right here. And I had a conversation with the CEO of a CDP company not too long ago. And I found it really funny. And they were newer in the CDP side. They were, way up. And I said, so what are you trying to do? And they had taken the CDP and they had bolted on some other stuff with it. And he said, well, we're trying to sell CDPs. Great. Like, how are you different? And why should we want your CDP? And he said, well, it's going to really house everyone's data and do some things that other people can't. Great, tell me more. What's that really mean? He goes, well, you put your data in, and then we can do all these things. I said, stop, just time out. Like, the put your data in part, talk to me about that. He said, oh, we don't want to do that. That's hard. That's where all the magic is. Because the CDP, once that's figured out, we're happy to take it and then do something with it. And that's a very, very important part. I don't mean any disrespect at all by this conversation. My point in bringing that up is to say that strategy of how you start to bring your data across into some platform that continue to be extensible, without that, really, really tough. So those are the 3 pillars. Understanding that with the the preamble of what is your overall structural strategy and what is my process to get to prioritization. There are companies like ours, like many others, that will go out there and help you do that. You may have staff that can do that. You may be the people that can do that. But having that buy-in around that, on the whole culture of what you're trying to accomplish, that's the way that this is going to get enabled. So what are we chasing? Well, better decisions, better systems and teams, and better customer engagements. And that's putting the client goals back at the beginning here, and substitute client for, if you're on the client side relative to an agency, put your boss's goal, your department's goal, if you're an NGO, if you're a funder, whatever you are, it's all the same. That part's all the same. All right. Thank you. I actually left a couple minutes for questions.